The council wiped out the colony. One human battleship ended their rule. The broadcast did not begin with a warning. It began with a list. 12,400 names, each one a colonist on Kepler 442b, each one now reclassified as low-priority population under Administrative Dissolution Order 7K331. The tribunal had voted. The vote was not close, and the man who would answer them was sitting in a room that smelled of tea and old paint, holding a cup his daughter had made when she was 7. Captain Elias Vance touched the bronze sunburst pin at his collar. The tarnished tip caught no light in the dim mess. He had worn the pin for 11 years. He had commanded the anvil for 11 years. He had been in the fleet for 19. He was 44 years old, gray at his temples, and he had a habit of counting to 47 before he spoke. The transmission arrived at 14:32 ship time. Vance read it twice. He set the cup down. He did not speak for 47 seconds. Commander Samira Okonkwo found him there. She was 37, the tactical officer, and she carried a photograph in her breast pocket. The founding ceremony of Kepler 442b, her great-grandmother in the front row, 180 years ago. She had looked at that photograph every day for 11 years. "Captain," she said, "the tribunal." "I read it." Vance's voice was quiet. It was always quiet. "Get me Lieutenant Chen and Sergeant Dunn." Lieutenant Pavel Chen arrived at a jog. He was 29, communications, and he had a stutter that disappeared only when he read coordinates aloud. He read the dissolution order now. His voice was steady. Administrative withdrawal, effective immediately, no appeal window, no evacuation protocol. Sergeant Aria Dunn was 52. She had lost 2 fingers to frostbite on Kepler 442b during a training rotation 8 years ago. She wore a woven bracelet from the colony's last harvest festival, 14 months old. She looked at the photograph in Okonkwo's pocket. She looked at Vance. "The anvil," she said. "It's 900 million kilometers from the tribunal station." Vance picked up his cup. He drank around the crack. The crack was 7 years old. His daughter had made the cup. She was 14 now. She did not know what her father commanded. "Plot the course," Vance said, "and wake the Keening Charter." Across the ship, in a vault that had not been opened in 180 years, a document came out of dormancy. The Keening Charter, authorized by a human government that no longer existed, written in a language that had evolved since its signing, sealed with a biometric lock that required 3 living descendants of the original signatories. Vance was one. Okonkwo was another. The third was a farmer on Kepler 442b who would be dead in 72 hours if the tribunal's order stood. The farmer's name was Thomas Reeves. He was 68 years old. He had buried his wife in the colony soil 3 years ago. He had 2 children. He had a granddaughter who liked to draw animals with chalk. He did not know he was the lock. 3 days earlier, the Galactic Tribunal had convened in session 11,847. The chamber was enormous. Far walls vanished behind a soft amber haze. 4,200 seats rose in curved rows to a ceiling of transparent crystal that showed the gas giant below. The gas giant was the color of old bruises. The storms turned vast and slow. The air smelled of ozone and chemical neutrality. The tribunal's atmosphere was calibrated to offend no respiratory system, which meant it pleased none. 73 species sent representatives. The tribunal had existed for 11,400 years. It was the oldest continuous institution in the mapped galaxy, older than the star that warmed the Vorkai homeworld. Arbiter Velkorath stood at the central podium. He was Vorkai. His skin was the color of dried clay. He moved with the deliberate patience of a being who had watched civilizations rise and fall as a hobby. He was 847 years old. He had presided over 12 colony dissolutions. He did not consider this one remarkable. "The settlement at Kepler 442b," he said, "has been classified as an unregistered expansion. The colony population is 12,400. The environmental impact exceeds allowable thresholds by 340%. The tribunal has voted. The colony will be administratively withdrawn. The vote was 4,187 to 13. Ambassador Asara Tav of the Corvathi sat in the 13th dissenting seat. She was 312 years old. She had watched the human colony for 11 years. She knew the names of the children born there. She knew the school where they learned to read. She knew the graveyard where they buried their dead. She stood. Arbiter, she said, they have been there for 180 years. They have built schools. They have buried their dead in that soil. This is not an administrative matter. Velkorath turned to her. He had heard this objection 12 times before. 12 dissolutions, 12 objections, 12 dismissals. Ambassador Tav, he said, the cleaner word is withdrawal. The accurate word is your choice. He pressed the seal. The dissolution order transmitted. 12,400 human souls were reclassified. The tribunal moved to the next item on the agenda. Asara Tav sat down. She did not leave. She watched the arbiter move to the next vote. She watched the representatives return to their screens. She watched the amber haze settle over 4,200 seats that had just voted to erase a world. She thought of the children. She thought of their names. The anvil had been built 180 years ago. In the same year the Keening Charter was signed. It was the only ship of its class. The shipyards that constructed it had been dismantled 173 years ago. The engineers who designed it had taken their secrets to their graves. Their graves were scattered across 4 worlds. The ship was 1.2 kilometers long. Its hull was a composite that no living scientist fully understood. It had been assigned to patrol routes so remote that no alien vessel had ever recorded its silhouette. This was not an accident. This was the seed. The Keening Charter authorized something that no human government since had dared to explain. It was not a weapon. It was a condition. A single clause, written in the second year of the colony's existence, when the founders had watched the tribunal dissolve 3 other settlements and understood that their turn would come. In the event of administrative dissolution, the charter read, 1 vessel shall be empowered to deliver the human response. The response was not specified. The vessel was. Vance stood in the vault. The biometric lock required 3 living descendants, his palm, Okonkwo's palm, and Thomas Reeves's palm, 900 million kilometers away on a world that would be dead in 72 hours. The lock opened. The charter displayed. Vance read it once. He did not need to read it twice. Lieutenant Chen, he said, open a channel to Kepler 442b. I need Thomas Reeves to place his hand on a scanner in the next 6 hours. Chen's stutter returned. Captain, the colony, the dissolution order, they won't let him. They will let him, Vance said, because we will ask nicely. He touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. The anvil made the transit in 11 hours. Its engines did not register on tribunal sensors. This was not stealth technology. This was something older, a propulsion method that the ship's own crew did not fully comprehend. They knew only that it worked when the charter was active, that it had been tested twice in 180 years, both times in empty space, both times witnessed only by the stars. On the bridge, Okonkwo stood at tactical. Her photograph faced the display. Chen read coordinates aloud. His voice was steady. Dunn waited at the marine lock. Her bracelet clicked against her wrist. Vance sat in his chair. The chipped cup was on the console beside him. He had not filled it. He would not fill it until this was done. Lieutenant, he said, status on Kepler 442b. Chen's hands moved across the board. Thomas Reeves reached the Colonial Administration building. He placed his hand on the scanner. The biometric lock is complete. The charter is fully active. And the tribunal. No response to our approach vector. No hail, no challenge. Vance nodded. He counted to 47. Then he spoke. Open a channel, all frequencies, tribunal, council, and every species band. Chen's stutter was gone. Channel open, Captain. Vance did not raise his voice. "This is the anvil," he said. "You have dissolved a human colony. You have called it administrative. You have called it withdrawal. You have used the cleaner word." He paused. He looked at the cup. He looked at the gas giant turning below, the color of old bruises, the storms vast and slow. "We are here to give you the accurate one." Vel Korath was in his chambers when the alert came. His aide, Korath Ves, was 203 years old. He had recorded every vote for 97 years. Arbiter Korath Ves said, "A single human vessel, it is not responding to hails. It is not on any registry." Korath did not look up from his dissolution paperwork. "A protest," he said, "a gesture. The humans are emotionally undisciplined. Log it. Continue the withdrawal." The vessel has stopped 12 kilometers from Sovereign Regard. Korath's pen paused. 12 kilometers, inside the defensive perimeter. The station's automated systems should have fired, should have challenged, should have done something. Status of defensive systems. They do not recognize it, Arbiter. They do not recognize it as a threat. They do not recognize it at all. Korath set down his pen. For the first time in 847 years, something had happened that his systems could not categorize. On the bridge of the anvil, Vance waited. Okonkwo checked her tactical display. The anvil's systems showed Sovereign Regard in perfect detail. Every ship, every station, every colony, every coordinate the tribunal had used for 11,400 years. The anvil had known these locations for 180 years. It had never transmitted them. "You have 9 minutes," Vance said into the open channel. 9 minutes to rescind the order. 9 minutes to restore the colony's status. 9 minutes to understand what you have done. The channel remained open. The silence was 47 seconds long. Then Korath's voice came through, dry, small, the laugh of a being who had presided over 12 dissolutions and never once been questioned by force. 9 minutes, Korath said. "Log the threat. Continue the withdrawal." Vance did not reply. He picked up his cup. He looked at the crack. He waited. Partition 2, 10, 00020, 000 chars, 25%, 50%. The minutes passed. On the bridge of the anvil, Chen counted them aloud, not because anyone needed to hear, because his stutter disappeared when he spoke numbers, and the silence was too heavy without something breaking it. "Minute 3, he said. "Minute 4. Okonkwo stood at tactical. Her photograph faced the display. She did not touch it. She had touched it 11 years ago when she first came aboard. She had touched it every day since. Today she did not need to. The photograph was already looking at her. Dunn waited at the marine lock. Her bracelet clicked. She had worn it for 14 months. She would wear it until it broke. Then she would repair it. The Harvest Festival had been the last time the colony felt safe. She had been there for training. She had lost 2 fingers to the cold. She had gained a bracelet and a memory of children running between tables. Vance sat in his chair. The chipped cup was cold beside him. He had not filled it. He would not fill it until this was done. "Minute 5, Chen said. On Sovereign Regard, Korath stood at his chamber window. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises. He had watched it turn for 847 years. He had watched civilizations rise and fall. He had dissolved 12 colonies. He had never been questioned by force. He turned to Korath Ves. "Status of the vessel. Stationary, Arbiter, 12 kilometers, no weapons active, no shields raised, no communication since the initial transmission." "No communication," Korath repeated. He did not understand. Protesters argued. Dissidents threatened. The emotionally undisciplined shouted. This vessel did none of these things. It simply waited. "Continue the dissolution," Korath said. "The deadline is in 4 hours. The colony will be administratively withdrawn on schedule." Korath Ves recorded the order. He had recorded every vote for 97 years. He did not question. He did not dissent. He was the perfect instrument of institutional memory. But he noticed something. He noticed that the arbiter's hand, when he pressed the seal, was not as steady as it had been. The dried clay skin trembled, almost imperceptibly, almost. Asara Tav stood on the observation deck of Sovereign Regard. She had been standing there for 2 hours. She watched the anvil hold its position. She watched the stars behind it. She thought of the children's names she knew. A young Korvathi aide approached her. The aide was 73 years old, young by Korvathi standards. "Ambassador," the aide said, "the arbiter has asked why you have not returned to your chamber." "Tell him I am observing," Tav said. "Observing what?" Tav did not answer. She watched the anvil. She watched the silence around it. She had watched human ships for 11 years. They were quiet. They were methodical. They did not boast. They did not threaten. They simply did what they said they would do. She thought of the colony, the school, the graveyard, the chalk drawings on the walls. "Tell him," she said, "that I am watching something I do not yet understand." "Minute 6, Chen said. Vance stood. He walked to the viewport. The gas giant filled the screen. The storms turned, vast and slow, the color of old bruises. He had seen this gas giant once before, 11 years ago, on his first patrol. He had looked at it for 47 seconds, then he had turned away and done his job. He touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. "Commander Okonkwo," he said, "status of the broadcast system." "Active, Captain. The Keening Charter has fully engaged the primary array. All frequencies are open. All wavelengths are ready. The Cascade is armed." "And the coordinates?" "Every tribunal ship, station, and colony in the mapped galaxy. 180 years of data. Verified, stored, never transmitted." Vance nodded. He did not turn from the viewport. "Minute 7, Chen said. Korath sat at his desk. The dissolution paperwork lay before him. The order was clear. The procedure was established. The colony would be withdrawn. The humans would be reclassified. The matter would be closed. He could not concentrate. He kept looking at the screen. The anvil, 12 kilometers away, inside the defensive perimeter. The systems did not recognize it. The systems did not recognize it as a threat. They did not recognize it at all. This was the wrong detail, the detail that did not fit, the detail that his 847 years of experience could not categorize. "Korath Ves," he said, "pull the registry for this vessel, every record, every mention, every patrol log." Korath Ves worked. His fingers moved across the interface. He had recorded 97 years of votes. He had never been asked to search for a ship that did not exist. "Arbiter," he said, "there is no registry entry. There is no patrol log. There is no mention of a vessel-designated anvil in any tribunal database." Korath felt something cold in his chest. It was not fear. Fear required a future to worry about. This was something older, something that lived between the two halves of the same thought. "Then how," he said, "did it cross 900 million kilometers?" "Minute 8, Chen said. Vance returned to his chair. He sat down. He picked up the chipped cup. He did not drink. He held it in both hands. The crack was 7 years old. His daughter had made it. She was 14 now. She liked to draw animals with chalk. "Lieutenant," Vance said, "open the channel again." Chen's hands moved. The channel opened. All frequencies, all wavelengths, all species bands. "This is the anvil," Vance said. His voice was quiet. It was always quiet. "You have 1 minute remaining, 1 minute to rescind the order, 1 minute to restore the colony's status, 1 minute to understand what you have done." The channel remained open. The silence was 47 seconds long. Then Korath's voice came through, different now, smaller. The laugh was gone. "What do you want?" Korath asked. Vance looked at the cup. He looked at the crack. He set it down. "We want nothing," he said. "We have already taken what we need." Korath stared at the screen. The words did not make sense. "We want nothing. We have already taken what we need." "What have you taken?" he asked. But the channel was silent. The anvil did not reply. It simply waited, 12 kilometers away. inside the defensive perimeter, invisible to every system that should have seen it. Korath stood. He walked to the window. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises. He had watched it turn for 847 years. He had never felt small. He felt small now. "Minute 9, Chen said. Vance set down the cup. He stood. He touched the sunburst pin at his collar, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. "Engage," he said. The broadcast did not shout. It did not threaten. It listed. Location after location, vessel after vessel, colony after colony, the entire mapped galaxy laid out in a single transmission, each coordinate precise, each timestamp accurate, each entry verified by a ship that had never been seen because it had chosen not to be seen. The anvil had sat in blind spots for 180 years. It had watched, it had waited, and now, in the 3 seconds it took a fleet commander to read the first page, the concept of unseen ceased to exist. The signal traveled on every frequency, every wavelength, every medium that the tribunal had used for 11,400 years. It reached every ship, every station, every colony, every representative in the 4,200 seats. The signal carried data. The data was simple, the location of every tribunal asset in the galaxy and the anvil's own capabilities, not exaggerated, not threatened, simply listed. The hull composite, the propulsion method, the system that allowed a single ship to know, with perfect precision, the location of every vessel in a 73-species civilization. Fleet Commander Dren Voss of the Cartharani was the first to understand. He was not human. He had never met a human. He commanded a patrol fleet of 40 vessels on the outer rim. He was 312 years old. He had served the tribunal for 2 centuries. He read the broadcast in 3 seconds. He understood in 3 more. The anvil had known his location for 180 years. It had known the location of every ship in his fleet. It had known the patrol routes, the supply lines, the defensive positions. It had known everything, and it had never transmitted. It had never threatened. It had never even been seen. "Communications," he said. His voice was not steady. "Verify this signal, verify the source, verify everything." "It is verified, Commander. The source is the anvil. The data is accurate. The coordinates are correct, every entry." Dren Voss sat down. He was 312 years old. He had served the tribunal for 2 centuries. He had never felt fear. Fear required a future to worry about. He had no future, not the one he had planned, not the one where the tribunal was eternal and the Cartharani were safe. "All ships," he said, "hold position, do not fire, do not move, do not do anything until I understand what I am looking at." Across the galaxy, 4,187 species who had voted for dissolution received the same broadcast, and in the silence that followed, they understood that the human colony was never the point. The point was the 180 years of silence that allowed the anvil to become something they could not explain. Korath listened to the broadcast 7 times. He sat in his chambers. He did not move. He did not speak. Korath Ves stood beside him, silent, recording. The arbiter pressed the seal. The dissolution order was rescinded. He did not explain why. He could not explain why. He simply pressed the seal and sat back down. He would not emerge from his chambers for 3 days. Partition 3, 20, 00030, 000 chars, 50%, 75%. The rescission order traveled slower than the broadcast. It moved through the same channels, the same frequencies, the same 11,400 years of institutional architecture. But where the broadcast had been a flood, the rescission was a whisper, a single line of text, a seal pressed by a hand that trembled. On the anvil, Chen saw it first. "Captain," he said, "the dissolution order, it has been withdrawn." Vance did not move. He sat in his chair. The chipped cup was cold beside him. He had not filled it. He would not fill it until this was done. "Acknowledged," he said. Captain, Chen said again, the Arbiter has rescinded. The colony is no longer low priority. The withdrawal is cancelled. I heard you, Lieutenant. Vance touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip. He looked at the viewport. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises, the storms vast and slow. The broadcast, he said, is it still running? Yes, Captain, the Keening Charter maintains the cascade, every frequency, every wavelength, every species band. Good. Captain Chen paused, his stutter returned. The colony is saved, the order is rescinded, why do we continue to broadcast? Vance looked at him for 47 seconds, then he spoke. Because, he said, they have not yet understood what they have seen. On sovereign regard, the chamber was silent. 4,200 seats, 73 species, the amber haze, the crystal ceiling, the gas giant turning below, all of it was the same, all of it was different. Ambassador Asara Tav stood in the gallery. She had been standing there for 3 hours. She watched the representatives read their screens. She watched them read the broadcast. She watched them understand. A Vorkai delegate approached her. The delegate was 600 years old. His skin was the color of dried clay. His eyes were polished obsidian. He had voted for the dissolution. Ambassador Tav, he said, what is this vessel? What are these humans? Tav looked at him. She looked at the screen in his hand, the coordinates, the locations, the data that the anvil had known for 180 years. They are the ones who did not shout, she said. I do not understand. No, Tav said, you do not, that is the point. She turned back to the viewport. She watched the anvil hold its position. She thought of the children's names. She thought of the school. She thought of the graveyard where they buried their dead. She thought of the chalk drawings. Korath sat in his chambers. He had not moved in 6 hours. The broadcast played on a loop. The coordinates, the capabilities, the list that never ended. Korath Ves stood beside him. The aide was 203 years old. He had recorded every vote for 97 years. He had never seen an arbiter sit in silence for 6 hours. Arbiter, he said, the representatives are convening. They have questions. They demand answers. Korath did not look up. What do I tell them? Korath Ves asked. Tell them, Korath said. His voice was dry, small, the voice of a being who had presided over 12 dissolutions and never once been questioned by force. Tell them that the accurate word has been spoken. Fleet Commander Dren Voss of the Kartharani sat on his bridge. He had not moved in 2 hours. His fleet of 40 vessels held position. No one had fired. No one had moved. No one had done anything. Commander, his communications officer said. The tribunal is requesting a status report. They want to know why we have not engaged. Dren Voss looked at the screen. The broadcast was still playing. The coordinates of his fleet, the coordinates of every fleet, the locations of every ship, every station, every colony, all of it known, all of it mapped, all of it held by a single vessel that had chosen not to be seen. Tell them, Dren Voss said, that we are reading. Reading what, Commander? The list, Dren Voss said. We are reading the list, and we are wondering what else it knows. The broadcast continued. It reached the outer rim. It reached the core worlds. It reached the colonies that had been dissolved and the colonies that had been spared. It reached the ships in transit and the stations in orbit and the outposts on dead worlds. Every species received it. Every species read it. Every species understood, in the 3 seconds it took to read the first page, that the concept of unseen had ceased to exist. On a small world near the galactic edge, a human farmer named Thomas Reeves stood in the Colonial Administration building. He had placed his hand on the scanner 6 hours ago. He had saved the colony. He did not know how. He did not know why. He looked at the screen. The broadcast was playing, coordinates, locations, data. He did not understand any of it, but he understood one thing. The ship that had saved his world was still broadcasting. The colony was saved. The order was rescinded, but the broadcast continued. Thomas Reeves had buried his wife in the colony soil 3 years ago. He had 2 children. He had a granddaughter who liked to draw animals with chalk. He had placed his hand on a scanner and become part of something he did not understand. He touched the screen. The coordinates scrolled past. He did not recognize any of them, but he recognized the symbol at the top of the broadcast, a bronze sunburst, 8-pointed, slightly tarnished at one tip. He had seen that symbol once before, on a uniform, on a man who had visited the colony 11 years ago, a quiet man, gray at the temples, who had looked at the school and the graveyard and the chalk drawings and had said nothing. Thomas Reeves understood now. The quiet man had been measuring. On the anvil, Vance stood. "Minute 12, Chen said. "The broadcast has been active for 3 minutes beyond the deadline." "Continue," Vance said. "Captain," Okonkwo said. She stood at tactical. Her photograph faced the display. "The tribunal fleet is mobilizing 40 vessels from the inner defense ring. They are moving to intercept. Distance 8,000 kilometers. They will be in weapons range in 4 minutes." Vance touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip. He looked at the viewport. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises. "Continue the broadcast," he said. Captain Okonkwo's voice was steady, but her hand was on the photograph. "They are armed. They are coming. They will fire." "They will not fire," Vance said. "How do you know?" Vance looked at the cup. The crack was 7 years old. His daughter had made it. She was 14 now. She liked to draw animals with chalk. "Because," he said, "they have not finished reading." The tribunal fleet approached. 40 vessels, weapons hot, shields raised. They moved in formation, the way they had trained for 11,400 years, the way they had always moved, the way that had always worked. They stopped at 4,000 kilometers. The lead vessel, a Vorkai destroyer named Unyielding Continuity, opened a channel. "Unidentified vessel," the captain said. "You are in violation of tribunal space. You have broadcast classified data. You have threatened the security of the galactic order. Power down your systems. Surrender your vessel. You have 1 minute to comply." The channel remained open. The silence was 47 seconds long. Then Vance's voice came through, quiet, always quiet. "This is the anvil," he said. "We are not threatening, we are listing, we are showing, we are giving you the accurate word." "Power down," the captain repeated, "or we will fire." "You will not fire," Vance said. "Why?" "Because," Vance said, "you have not yet reached the part of the list that names your ship." On the bridge of the Unyielding Continuity, the captain looked at his screen. The broadcast was still playing. The coordinates scrolled past, colony after colony, station after station, ship after ship. He watched for his own vessel. He watched for the Unyielding Continuity. He knew where it was. He knew its patrol route. He knew its defensive position. He found it on the list. The coordinates were correct. The timestamp was accurate. The entry was verified. And beneath it, in a subcategory he had never seen before, was a line of text. Unyielding Continuity, Captain Vorath Kor, current psychological profile, stable, predicted response to existential threat, aggression within 8 seconds, recommended countermeasure, broadcast continuation. The captain stared. He had never been profiled. He had never been predicted. He had never been part of a list that knew what he would do before he did it. "All ships," he said. His voice was not steady. "Hold position, do not fire, do not move. Do not do anything until I understand what I am looking at." The fleet held. The broadcast continued. The anvil did not move. 12 kilometers from sovereign regard, inside the defensive perimeter, invisible to every system that should have seen it, visible to every species that now knew its name. Vance sat in his chair. He picked up the chipped cup. He drank around the crack. The tea was cold. He did not mind. "Captain," Chen said, "the broadcast has been active for 8 minutes. The tribunal has issued 17 emergency decrees. 3 species have called for special session. The Vorkai delegation has requested closed council. Acknowledged, Vance said. Captain, Chen said again, the colony is saved, the fleet has stopped, the order is rescinded, what more do we need to show them? Vance set down the cup. He touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. We need to show them, he said, that we are still here. Partition 430, 00040, 000 chars, 75%, 100%. The broadcast entered its 9th minute. Vance stood, he walked to the viewport. The gas giant filled the screen. The storms turned, vast and slow, the color of old bruises. He had seen this gas giant once before, 11 years ago. He had looked at it for 47 seconds, then he had turned away and done his job. He would not turn away this time. Lieutenant Chen, he said, close the broadcast, open a single channel, all frequencies, one transmission, one line. Chen's hands moved, the broadcast stopped, the cascade ended, the galaxy went silent. Then the channel opened. Vance touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. He looked at the gas giant, he looked at the cup. He looked at the crack that was 7 years old. He spoke. You counted our ships, he said. You never counted our silence. The transmission ended, the channel closed, the anvil did not move. The silence that followed was not empty, it was full. It was full of 4,187 species who had just heard a voice they did not understand. It was full of fleet commanders who had stopped their vessels. It was full of representatives who had left their seats. It was full of a galaxy that had measured power in ships and fleets and votes and colonies and had just been shown that power could be something else. Something quieter. Something that waited. Something that did not need to shout because it had already won. Korath Ves stood in the Arbiter's chambers. Korath had not moved in 9 hours. The broadcast was over. The transmission had ended. The dissolution order was rescinded. The colony was saved. But Korath sat in his chair. He stared at the screen, the 9 words, the voice, the quiet. Arbiter, Korath Ves said, the representatives are demanding your presence. The special session has convened. They have questions. Korath did not answer. Arbiter, Korath Ves said again, what do I tell them? Korath looked at him. His eyes were polished obsidian. They reflected light. They revealed nothing, but the light they reflected was different now, smaller, dimmed. Tell them, Korath said, that the cleaner word is no longer sufficient. He stood, he walked to the window. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises. He had watched it turn for 847 years. He had dissolved 12 colonies. He had never been questioned by force. He touched the glass, the screen that showed the anvil. 12 kilometers away, inside the defensive perimeter, invisible to every system that should have seen it. I am going to resign, Korath said. Korath Ves recorded the statement. He had recorded every vote for 97 years. He had never recorded an arbiter's resignation. Arbiter, he said, the tribunal has existed for 11,400 years. It is the oldest institution in the mapped galaxy. You cannot resign from history. I am not resigning from history, Korath said. I am resigning from the wrong word. He pressed the seal, not the dissolution seal, the resignation seal, the seal that ended his presidency, the seal that ended his authority, the seal that ended his 847 years of being right. Ambassador Asara Tav watched from the gallery. She saw Korath enter the chamber. She saw him walk to the podium. She saw him stand before 4,200 seats and 73 species and say the words she had waited 11 years to hear. I was wrong, he said. The chamber was silent. The amber haze settled. The crystal ceiling showed the gas giant turning below. The storms were vast and slow, the color of old bruises. The tribunal has existed for 11,400 years, Korath said. We have measured power in continuity, in precedent, in the cleaner word. We have dissolved 12 colonies. We have called it withdrawal. We have called it administrative. We have used the language of bureaucracy to hide the language of death." He paused, he looked at the gallery, he looked at Tav. "And today," he said, "a single ship taught us that we have been measuring the wrong thing." The anvil did not move. 12 kilometers from sovereign regard, inside the defensive perimeter. The fleet held position, the broadcast was over, the transmission had ended, the silence continued. On the bridge, Vance sat in his chair. The chipped cup was cold beside him. He had not filled it. He would fill it now. He poured the tea, the steam rose, he drank around the crack. The crack was 7 years old. His daughter had made it. She was 14 now. She liked to draw animals with chalk. "Captain," Chen said, "the tribunal has issued a new order. The colony is restored. The dissolution is erased. The human settlement at Kepler 442b is granted full protected status. No future dissolution may be proposed without unanimous consent." Vance nodded. He did not speak. He counted to 47, then he spoke. "Thomas Reeves," he said, "is he safe?" "Yes, Captain, the farmer. He is with his family. His granddaughter is drawing with chalk." Vance touched the sunburst pin, the tarnished tip. He looked at the viewport. The gas giant turned below, the color of old bruises, the storms vast and slow. "Plot a course," he said. "Patrol Route 7, the quiet one." "Captain," Okonkwo said, "the galaxy knows our name now. The anvil is not invisible anymore." "No," Vance said, "it is not." He stood, he walked to the viewport, he touched the glass, the stars beyond, the galaxy that had just learned a new word. "But the silence," he said, "is still ours." On Kepler 442b, Thomas Reeves stood in the schoolyard. His granddaughter was drawing with chalk, animals, stars, a ship with 8 points of light. She looked up at him. "Grandpa," she said, "what happened?" Thomas Reeves touched the screen in his pocket. The broadcast was gone, the coordinates were gone, but the symbol remained, the bronze sunburst, 8-pointed, slightly tarnished at one tip. He looked at the sky. He could not see the anvil. He knew it was there. He knew it had always been there. He knew it would always be there. "Nothing happened," he said. "We were counted, that is all." The anvil made the transit to Patrol Route 7. Its engines did not register on tribunal sensors. This was not stealth technology. This was something older, a propulsion method that the ship's own crew did not fully comprehend. They knew only that it worked, that it had always worked, that it would continue to work. The galaxy changed. The tribunal fractured. The 4,187 species who had voted for dissolution now looked at humans differently, not as threats, not as enemies, as something they could not explain. Something that waited. Something that measured. Something that chose not to be seen until it chose to be seen. Vance sat in the mess. The tea was warm, the cup was chipped. The crack was 7 years old. He touched the sunburst pin at his collar, the tarnished tip, the light that finds what hides in shadow. The broadcast signal had carried the sunburst emblem in its header. 4,187 species had seen it. The tarnished tip, finally, had caught the light. He poured another cup. He drank around the crack. The tea was warm, the ship was quiet, the patrol route was empty. He counted to 47. Then he spoke. "Continue," he said.